I'm about to grab all the gear I've got in this room and set it up in a dedicated studio space. But while it's being built, I need to figure out how to do the interior design and, more importantly, the acoustics of the room. And up until this point, I thought I was going to do everything by myself, but it's getting a little bit more complicated than I thought. So today I'm going to get the help of an actual expert in acoustics, and we're going to figure out what I should and maybe more importantly should not be doing when I'm designing this new room. In the previous video in this series, I showed you how I'm figuring out where to place my acoustic treatment to get the best result. I figured out what room modes were going to be an issue at what point in the room and how I could use that info to determine what the best spot would be for my listening position. And even though I know a bit about acoustics and setting up a studio space, I am not really an expert in that field. But luckily, I know somebody who is. Oh, by the way, if you're interested in getting on a Zoom call with Markus, he does consultancy sessions as well. So check out the description down below, because there I'll let you know how you can book that for yourself.
I was really pleased by your video because it's great. You came to all these acoustic rules of thumb and to all those do's and don'ts. It's really good. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, nice. That's
Very clever.
great to hear. I wasn't sure. This was just what I picked up from our conversation the other time and from talking to a lot of people that build studios and have studios that they ran into and building my own setup 100,000 times. And this was just what I picked up, but I never actually sat down with somebody and did a checklist of, is what I'm doing actually correct, or is it like...
It was really great that you calculated the first own mode, let's say longitudinal wave, so front wall, back wall, and then you went into the AMROC calculator, and then you say, okay, the first own mode is what frequency, so what is 1/4 of the wavelength? And then you found it's in the middle. It's always in the middle.
So the wavelength being almost 14 meters divided by 4 means we need to place 3.5 meters of rock wool. Let's roughly do this. Yeah.
Because that's the way it's defined. This is what's happening. It is happening that on the front wall, you have very high sound pressure and no sound velocity, very low sound velocity. And on the back of the wall, you have the same very high sound pressure and very low velocity. And in between those, right in the middle, you have the opposite. No sound pressure and a lot of sound velocity. And this is exactly where a porous absorber is very effective.
So could you, in theory, well, I'm not going to do this in the middle of my room, but let's say we're going a couple of room modes up. Could we place a 10 centimeter rock wool wall, like 60 centimeters from the back wall, and then could we leave that space open, or do we need to fill up that space to absorb everything, or can we just put something in between? It goes through it, it breaks it, the speed down, the velocity down, and then we have that absorbed.
It's a very good question.
Before we dive into the next section, I think it's good to explain a little bit about the graph that you're seeing in front of you. This graph shows you the absorption coefficient. We use this graph to determine how good an element or a product is at absorbing sound over a frequency range. So over here you can see that on the x-axis we've got 10 hertz to 1.25 kilohertz. So that's the frequency that we are absorbing. And then on the y-axis it shows you the absorption coefficient. So it's easiest to see these as percentages. So an absorption coefficient of 1 means 100% absorption, and 0 is no absorption at all. So for example, if we look at 40 hertz in this model, then you see that about 20% of that gets absorbed. Now, if we look at 160 hertz, you see that about 85 to 90% gets absorbed. So we use that to kind of predict what a certain element, what a certain absorber is going to do acoustically in our room, which will come in very handy later.
So this is 25 centimeter of rock wool. The thing is, rock wool is not rock wool, so I used Sonorock and Tamarock 30, just two different models. I think Tamarock has a bit higher density, but we see that the absorption is very high here, let's say above 150 or 60 hertz, and then it's going down, but still at, let's say, 80 hertz, we do still have reasonable absorption. Sonorock around 50% and a bit more, like almost 70% Tamarock. This is happening if we take the same rock wool, 25 centimeters, and now we place it with a 25 centimeter gap to the wall. So the whole construction is now 50 centi.
Yeah.
25 centimeters of rock wool and 25 centimeters of air. And what happens is that we have a much stronger absorption in the low frequency range. And very interesting, this is the difference between the two rock wool models or products. The difference is much bigger now. So if we again look at 44 hertz, which is over here, we see that with the Tamarock, we have something like 80+%, which is totally great. While with only Sonorock, we have something like 55%.
Let's say like on the sidewalls, we can't do that. We're very limited, but maybe for the longitudinal wave in the back wall, we could do 25 rock wool, 25 air. But would the 25 rock wool and 25 air be superior to 50 rock wool?
Depending on the material used. If the bass trap or the absorber module is too thick and we are using a very good, strong material with high density and a high streaming resistivity, the sound simply cannot pass through. And then it can be an advantage to have some air behind. If we're using a material with a different streaming resistivity, it can be better to have full material with no air behind. And sometimes it's a very good idea to try a combination of sometimes small panels with high density and bigger parts with lower density. But as a rule of thumb, it's usually a good idea to increase the distance between the rigid wall and the front of the absorber. And if you're short of money, then it's usually a good idea to spend this money in a small absorber module, foam, rock wool, whatever, and place it with a big distance to the wall.
Going off of that, I want to ask you an idea I had, which I'm really excited about, and I hope it is going to work, actually. Ideally, what I would like to do is make a wall right there at 50 or 60 centimeters, make it 10, 12, 15 centimeters deep, then make an opening somehow, somewhere, and then use the back as storage space.
Okay, yeah.
Would that work?
Again, it very much depends on what you place there. I mean, if there is an empty cardboard box, that's probably much closer to the air that we are calculating with here than if you place a massive flight case for your keyboard. Probably it's a better idea to build it with air, which we know is working, and then maybe try it out. I mean, all these models are models. That's not the reality, that's the model. And it's not 100% what's going to happen afterwards. It is a calculation.
Okay, so trial and error has to wait until I actually get the keys. But is there other stuff we can figure out right now? Well, apparently Markus and his team have developed a set of tools that can help you predict and visualize your room's behavior. So let's have a look at what that can tell us.
This is what your room looks like at 25 hertz.
Yeah.
This is two speakers and a listening position at 38% of the room length.
Oh, that's the first spot.
Exactly. That's the first spot. And then we have two speakers playing the same signal. And what we have here is the front back wall, so the first mode. In the middle of the room, there is no sound pressure because all the energy is into sound velocity. And then you have a big impact of sound in the front and on the back of the room.
So there would be a huge dip.
There will be a huge, if you don't place any bass traps, there will be a huge dip over here. Then at 50 hertz, the second mode in this direction, you will have two positions where we have like dips. So this is exactly the frequency, 50 hertz wavelengths is exactly the length of your room. This is the frequency response that we are expecting at 38% distance to the front wall, 38% of the room length. And so we clearly see here 25 hertz, 50 hertz, we see those guys.
Okay, those peaks look like serious problems. And as far as I know, the only way I can get rid of them is by stuffing half of my room with rock wool, which obviously I am not going to do because I don't even have... Do I have to explain that? No, right? So hopefully Markus is going to have an alternative solution that takes up a little bit less space.
So if we place a very good bass trap on the rear wall, then you see immediately that those really, really high peaks disappear. So this is 25 hertz. With a bass trap on the rear wall. So we do still see that there is a difference. So it gets louder if you go to the back. If we compare it with this situation, it's a huge difference. The same with 50 hertz. That's 50 hertz without bass traps. That's 50 hertz with a good bass trap at the back of the wall. And that's 75 hertz with no bass trap, with the bass trap on the back of the wall. So that illustrates that just by putting a good bass trap on the back of the wall, we do solve the main issues.
Okay, so with a fairly chunky absorber on the rear wall, we can get rid of a lot of the big issues in the room. But all of these tests have been done with the listening position at 38% of the room and the speakers a little bit off the wall. But I wonder what we can gain if we actually put the speakers right up against the wall, so we eliminate as much speaker boundary interference as possible, and with that also put the listening position a little bit more forward. Basically how I had it at the end of the previous video.
Totally correct what you said. It's a good idea to place the speakers directly on the front wall. So they cannot produce any sound to the back, which can be reflected because they are right on the front wall. But then we will not be able to stay at the probably good 38% position, or we would not be able to stay with our 60-degree triangle.
Right.
I would put this triangle stuff aside for a second, and I would like to make a comment on the 38%.
Yeah.
That is a very good rule of thumb for the first guess, but not more.
The 38% rule essentially did what I figured out with, like, was it a good thing to just basically draw the room modes? Kind of.
Loved it.
Kind of like
I loved
a
it.
very, very minimalistic, basic approach to what you're showing me right now with all the graphs and simulations and everything. But that was my train of thought, and probably that's also how the 38% rule was born,
Exactly.
because that falls in between most of the room modes.
Exactly. That's exactly, you figured it out exactly the way it is. Yeah. That's where it comes from. Again, we can use the simulation for it. So in this example, my dear colleague Jan, he pushed the speakers and the listening position as well. So keeping the 60-degree triangle to the
Mhm.
front wall. And then we see that here at around 90 hertz, 100 hertz, where probably the peak of the speaker boundary interference cancellation is taking place,
Yeah.
we're getting much more energy.
Yeah.
So
It becomes
there's not really happening a lot over here. So there is a bit more, but it's much more even and flat and much better over here.
That looks very promising in the low end. But so far, we only have spoken about the low end. So I think it's time to look at early reflection points, treating the side walls, the ceiling, all of that stuff to get a flat response in the mid and highs as well.
Right now, we first talked about own modes, then speaker boundary interference, and we missed out a big thing in the middle, the mid and high frequency range treatment that we need. He did the same when adding sidewall absorption and ceiling absorption.
Yeah.
This dip here at 60 hertz is not there anymore, but we see that it's getting over here, it's getting a bit closer, a bit better. But still, in all those simulations, we still have too much energy here at 27, wherever, and maybe broadband until 55 or something.
And would you use something like SonarWorks or Trinov to do that, to let that do the fine tuning for you?
Generally speaking, having a room correction system is like 80, 90% of maybe 95% of our studios, professional studios do have a room correction system. Hopefully not something that has to do big things, but to have a smooth and linear frequency response.
And how much would you let the Trinov do? Do you first want to get the room, the RT60 down so the sound waves are not bouncing off so much anymore, and then let the Trinov do the fine tuning? Or do you actually, like, how much can the Trinov do for you? I'm guessing that if you put it in an empty room, it's not going to fix everything. You need to do something. But how much do you actually physically do acoustically, and how much can the Trinov take over?
That's an easy question. We do everything in the real world that we can. If we're placing a bass trap at the back of the wall, we're working on the effect, on the physics as directly, and that's always the best for three reasons. Reason one is frequency response gets better. That can be corrected by a filter as well. Reason two is that frequency response on a different position gets better as well. And this is usually, or in many cases, even worse when using a filter, because if I have not enough energy here and I'm pushing the system, the guy that's standing behind me, where it's too much already, he's getting more and he needs less.
I remember running into the exact situation that Markus is describing here at the Next Movement Studios, where we were setting up the Trinov system and fine-tuning that. And at the listening position, it was nice and flat, but then a meter back at the racks, it got very, very boomy.
It boosts here, so this mode gets solved, but then here it's in a different, like here
this was
it's
already on minus 10?
adding, and here it's decreasing, and here it's like attenuating.
Attenuation can
So the boost gets even more here. I think that's the problem.
And second, having an own mode which is not damped has a time domain problem as well. The room starts to boom because we are filling energy in the room, and then it's going to be decay slowly, and we cannot work on this just by using a filter. So we do everything we can in real world, and then we let the filter do the last bit. If we have the green frequency response, that's great, because then I would ask the correction filter to get rid of some energy here and to get rid of some energy here, broadband, and we would just go to that 90 dB line and it's very easy and totally, it's no problem at all to get rid of some energy and as broadband as possible. Maybe we can go with a low shelf around 55 hertz or something, and then we would have really great and flat frequency response in the bass. A really effective bass trap on the rear wall is king in your studio. And adding some absorption on the sideboards and on the ceiling with the broadband absorber with 15 centi. I think he used our A115, which is a 15 centi broadband absorber.
Okay.
It's not a real bass trap. That's why it's not really flat. But
So
it's getting
it already does that when I do I don't have to do 25 centimeters. I can just
probably not.
To be honest, if I don't have to lose 25 centimeters on the left and the right wall, that would be a huge win. Imagine the amount of space I can save if I can just do 15 centimeters on either side. At this point, we have all the walls covered. The side to side, the ceiling, the rear wall, but not the front wall. And here is where I feel I am a little bit stuck, because I'm used to seeing studios, including the Red Bull studio that I've ran for years, to have flush mounted monitors. That means they're built into your front wall and they are part of your acoustical design of the front wall. Now, I don't want to go for a flush mount design right now with the SEM25s I've got, because I think I might be upgrading in the future. So right now I just want to put them on the stands, put them right up against the front wall, and then build something around it that eventually I could replace for a flush mounted wall with an upgraded set of monitors. But right now, if I'm being really honest with you, I am broke. And that means I can definitely not upgrade these monitors, so I think I'll just have to do with what I've got. But that still leaves me with the question of what I should be doing with that front wall. Should I be treating that with acoustic panels wherever I have space left? Or should I just leave it bare and put a TV up? And honestly, that's pretty close to what I have right now, because I've just got a bunch of glass windows and doors behind my speakers. Should basically function the same, and that works for me right now. So why wouldn't it in the studio?
That's the last simulation we have. The green line is rear wall, sideboards, and ceiling. And the red line is the same plus front wall. And there is a difference. It's not a huge difference. Again, don't take this too much into account. If we cannot place the speakers to the front wall, then the difference will be bigger. But in your case, as the room is not huge, I would think it's great to put the speakers to the front, because that gives you more space at the back of the room. So I cannot think of a reason for not placing the speakers to the front wall. I would advise you on not leaving the front wall free, because if you have big reflective items, you can hear them.
So we'll do a little bit of something.
A little bit of diffusion or absorption, yes.
Right. Okay, so we'll make an art piece, some kind of art piece on that wall.
Art is very, very welcome.
Okay, that was a lot of food for thought. As this video goes live, I'm probably at Super Booth, maybe even drinking a beer with Markus. If you're also at Super Booth, DM me on Instagram and let's meet over there. It will be super fun to meet you and hang out. When I get back to Amsterdam, the studio is supposed to be ready and I'm getting the key to it. So then it is time to implement everything I have learned so far and all the designs I have made. Honestly, I have made 500 different designs for this room, so I better not change my mind once I get started. But it's gonna be a lot of fun. If you want to support the channel and help me make this studio the most amazing place you've ever seen, make sure to check out the affiliate links down below. I've got one for Thomann and I've got one for KMR Audio Germany as well as the UK. And for the KMR shops, you can get a 5% discount with the code Thomas5. So pick up yourself some nice piece of gear with a little bit of discount and help me while you're at it. If you're not planning on buying any gear, leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and commenting down below if you have any questions about acoustics or you just want to wish me happy building, it all helps the channel. So it is very much appreciated. If you want to book an acoustic consultancy session with Markus for your own room, I left some links and info in the description for you to book a session for yourself. So enjoy. And I hope this helps you in future studio builds. I will talk to you soon. Later!